So you want to learn how to knit. You might be thinking you're going to get yarn that looks like this and some needles that look like this. No, I mean you can. But what I'm going to suggest is that you look for yarn that looks like this, thick and chunky, and needles that look like this. Why? Because you're a beginner and you're slow. And thicker yarn will help your project knit up much faster so you can stay motivated to keep going. These silly looking knitting needles are called circular needles because they make it easy to knit in a circle. But you don't have to knit in a circle with circular needles, you can also knit flat. And the reason why myself and many other knitters prefer circular needles for everything is because while you're knitting, your work will hang on this little cord right here, whereas with more traditional straight needles, while you're knitting, your work kind of hangs on the back of the needle right here, and it's a lot more straining on your wrist. So how do you know which yarn and needles to buy? You're going to look on the back of your yarn ball for this little picture of a yarn ball, and you want one that says 6, just like this. That represents a yarn weight scale from 1 to 7, 7 being the chunkiest, so a yarn that says 6 is the second most chunky sort of yarn. If you're curious, a 7 looks more like this. But anything that says 6 is perfect for you, beginner. And to find the correct needle size for your yarn, turning back to that yarn label, you can see there's literally a little picture of needles right here, and they say 9mm or US 13. So you'll walk over to the needle section at your craft store and find the circular needle that says 9mm or US 13, or whatever the back of your yarn ball says. And since today we're making a scarf, a 16-inch cord is all you need. If you're going to make a blanket or something, you would need something longer. So when you've got your super bulky 6-weight yarn and matching circular needles, we'll begin with the cast on. For the project we'll be working on today, this beautiful long scarf, we're going to need to cast on 20 stitches. I'll show you 2 ways, the fast way and the best way. First, we'll do the fastest. For either cast on, you're going to need to make a slip knot. To do that, take your yarn, make a little fold like this, twist it once towards you so that your strands crisscross, and reach down through your loop to grab the yarn behind the crisscross and pull it through like this. And you'll know it's a slip knot because it slips. Again, fold the yarn, twist it once towards you, reach down into your loop and grab the short strand and pull it through. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to do the fast cast on, also called the backwards loop cast on. When you place your slip knot on your needle, you're going to take the yarn that's attached to your yarn ball in your hand like this. Then you're going to scoop up your yarn with your thumb away from you, bring it back towards you. See this strand that's laying on your thumb? Place your needle up under that yarn and then slip out your thumb, and you've cast a loop onto your needle. I'll do it slowly for you again. Grab the yarn in your hand like this. Give me a thumbs up. Hey. Heading away from you at first, scoop your yarn up with your thumb, and then stick your needle underneath the yarn that's laying on top of your thumb. Slip your thumb out and pull tight, but not too tight. This cast on can be quite tight if you're not careful. Once you get the hang of the motion, you can cast on a lot of stitches very quickly. And the reason why it's not the best cast on is because, like I said, it can be very tight, so it makes knitting the next row a little more difficult, especially for beginners. It doesn't always give the cleanest looking edge, and if you plan to seam your project, like in an infinity scarf, for example, it's not the easiest edge for seaming. So I'm going to push all of these stitches off my needle to show you what I think is the best cast on method, the most versatile. You can't go wrong with this cast on method, which is called the long tail cast on method. One of the tricky parts about it, you need to know how long of a tail you'll need to cast on all of your stitches. So before you make your slip knot, you're going to want to wrap your yarn around your needle for as many stitches as you need, in this case 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 17, 17, 18, 19, 20. And now this is the tail length that you're going to need to cast on all your stitches with the long tail cast on method. Now you can make a slip knot again. You'll place your slip knot on your needle. You're going to grab the 2 strands in your hand like this. Then separate them with your index finger and thumb like so. Make sure that the strand that's on your thumb is your tail and not the yarn connected to your yarn ball. And then turn your palm up to make a little heart. Reach the tip of your needle under the first strand, over the second strand, under the third strand, and then bring it back through the loop coming off of your thumb. Then you can pull on your tail to tighten up the stitch. Now I know that looked super complicated, so I'm going to show you a million more times. Grab both strands in your hand, separate them with your index finger and thumb, turn your palm up to make a little heart, reach the tip of your needle under the first strand of your heart, over the second strand, under the third strand, pull it through the loop coming off of your thumb, and cinch it up. Grab, separate, heart, under, over, under, bring it through the loop, tighten it up. Grab, separate, heart, under, over, under, bring it through the loop, tighten it up. You'll do this for 20 stitches. Now that you've cast on all your stitches, turn your needle so that your left hand needle has all the stitches and the right hand needle is free. We're going to ignore the tail from now on. Make sure you don't knit with the tail. So from here you have a couple of options. You can either hold your yarn in the right hand or in the left hand. Either way, you're going to keep tension on your yarn by scooping it up with your pinky, letting it rest on top of your index finger. And I'll demonstrate first how to knit holding the yarn in the right hand, which is called throwing, American style, or English style knitting. You're gonna insert your needle from this direction, not from this direction. Here, front to back. Stabilize your needles with your left hand while you let go of the needle with your right hand. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise. Pulling on the yarn with this finger to keep tension, slip the right needle through the stitch on the left needle, and now you can drop the stitch off of the left needle. And you've knit one stitch and transferred it onto your right needle. I'll show you that again. Insert your needle front to back, let go of the right needle, and wrap the yarn counterclockwise. Pull the new stitch through the old stitch and let the old stitch jump off. Front to back, counterclockwise, pull the stitch through, jump off. And that's how you knit with the yarn held in your right hand. You'll keep tension the same way with the yarn held in your left hand. Scoop it up with your pinky, drape the yarn over your index finger. Holding the yarn in your left hand is called continental or German style knitting. The same as before, you're going to insert your needle into the stitch front to back. Wrap the yarn counterclockwise, but with the yarn in your left hand this time. Keeping tension on that yarn with your left hand, pull the stitch through and let the old one jump off. With continental knitting, it's just natural to use your left thumb to hold the stitch as you're working. That makes it a lot easier. Well, easier for me, but not easier for you to see what I'm doing with my thumbs in the way so much. I prefer to knit with the yarn in my left hand because I learned to crochet first, and in crochet, you hold the yarn in the left hand. Some people say continental knitting is faster than throwing, but throwing is also a very popular and common knitting style. Try both since you're not partial to any one style yet. And when you get to the end of your row, you just knit the very last stitch the same way you've knit all the other stitches so far. And then you turn your work so that all the stitches are on your left hand needle and your right hand needle is free, and you can begin again. Front to back, counterclockwise wrap, pull it through, jump off. Front to back, wrap around, pull it through, jump off. And here's a little bit of knitting in real time just so you know what you're aiming for. You'll continue knitting every stitch until your scarf is 5 to 6 feet long, or as long as you want it to be, and then you'll need to bind off, which I'll show you how to do. right now. To bind off, you're going to start a row as you normally would by knitting the first stitch. Then you're going to knit the next stitch. And you're going to pass this first stitch over the second stitch, like this. Insert the tip of your needle into your first stitch. Then keep really good tension on this working yarn and pull the first stitch over the second stitch. Again, knit one stitch, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. By keeping good tension on your working yarn, insert your needle into the first stitch and pass it up and over the second stitch. You'll continue that until you've bound off every stitch of your scarf. And if you're having some trouble passing the first stitch over without getting the second stitch to jump off as well, you can hold the second stitch with your thumb as you pull it over. That makes it a little bit easier. Knit one, pass the first stitch up and over. Knit one, pass the first stitch up and over, all the way to the end. When you've got one stitch left on your needle, you're going to cut your yarn and then thread the little tail through the last loop and pull it tight. Now you have this little tail at the end of your work and this little tail at the beginning of your work. You're either going to need a crochet hook of a smaller size than your knitting needles, or a special kind of sewing needle like this called a tapestry needle or a darning needle. What makes it special is it has a really big eye for yarn and it's blunt. With the tapestry needle, I'll show you how you can bury your ends in your project. I'm going to stab the needle inside the shaft of yarn that makes up this bind off edge. Pull my yarn through, stretch it out so it's not all crumpled up like that. And then I'm going to come back around the other way, sticking the needle right through the yarn so that my tail can get kind of buried in the center of the yarn plies themselves. Straighten it out. Now you can cut your yarn really short and it will not unravel. Ta-da! And now with the crochet hook, I'll show you how you can weave in your ends by just sticking the crochet hook under those little cast-on stitches and weaving the yarn around and around. And then just turn it around and head back the other way. And again, you can cut the yarn very short. Now I know when you want to learn how to knit, this might not be the texture that you had in mind. You might have been thinking more of a fabric that looks like this, with these little V-shaped stitches. This stitch is called stockinette, and to do it, you're going to need to know the knit stitch that you learned today, as well as the purl stitch. And that is what we will be covering in my next video. I hope that this project is just the beginning of your lifelong obsession with yarn. And in case you're wondering, yes, I did make this cozy sweater myself. I write all sorts of knitting and crocheting patterns, so check out my website linked down below, and consider subscribing so I can teach you more stuff. Thanks for watching, bye! And thicker yarn will help your project knit up. So you want to, too close, or just the beginning of your lifelong yarn journey.